So, when people try to lose weight, usually the recommendation is to eat in a calorie deficit. So, I want to hear your thoughts about calories and what do you recommend as an advice for people that are trying to lose weight?
Well, I mean, I think thinking about things as a calorie is a pretty outdated way of thinking. Calorie is a measure of heat energy. We're not steam locomotives. We're not burning things to release calories, and that's how they were measured. They burn things and see how much energy is released. But that doesn't actually denote how much chemical energy you're going to get from something, or if your body's even going to use those for chemical energy, because the majority of the protein that we eat is not used as energy. It's used for physical structures and building blocks. And when every molecule that your DNA codes for is a string of amino acids, and so that's what those proteins get used for, is to build those proteins and amino acids in those amino acid chains from your DNA. So that they're getting used as building blocks. They're not being used as energy. They can be used as energy, but the majority of them don't get used as energy. So you can't count that in your energy equation. Um, these sorts of things work different ways. They influence hormones differently. Carbohydrates will give a big rise in your insulin. Insulin is the fat storage hormone. You cannot store fat without insulin. Um, type 1 diabetics, they don't make insulin. They could eat 50,000 calories a day. They don't put on any fat. They don't put on any weight. And in fact, there's an eating disorder with type 1 diabetics, um, called diabulimia, that where they just decide, okay, I want to, I'm going to a beach party this weekend and I want to look shredded. So I'm just going to stop taking insulin for 3 or 4 days and just drop 20 pounds in that time. Doesn't matter what they eat. Horribly dangerous and horribly bad for them. You can die. You can go into DKA, but people do this because it just loses so much body fat. It's so easy to lose weight. It's really bad for them, causes a lot of glycation, a lot of high blood sugar, which damages them. But people do that. And so, but that's just a demonstration of how that hormone works. And carbohydrates really raise that. And so, if you look at the other side of it, you have a tumor that secretes insulin called an insulinoma. It doesn't matter what you eat or what you don't eat. People cannot lose body fat until that tumor is taken out. Cannot. And you'll look it up, insulinoma. And so, if your insulin goes high enough, you cannot burn fat because it blocks lipolysis. And there are some things that can still access your fat, but it's very hard to access your fat with high insulin. And so you need to be able to control your insulin. And so eating different ways can control your insulin. It can control your fat storage, can control your metabolism, and control how much energy your body uses versus how much it stores. And insulin is a major part of that, but things like leptin are also important. And leptin is a satiety hormone. It tells your body how to raise or lower your metabolism, to store or use body fat and ramp up your energy usage and utilization, or not, or bring it down and increase your appetite because you need more energy, not less energy. You need to store it, those sorts of things. So insulin blocks leptin. Sugar blocks leptin, alcohol blocks leptin, lectins, the plant toxins, block leptin because lectins can bind to insulin receptors 5 times more tightly than insulin in some cases. And other things like stress and poor sleep and high cortisol and things like that can block leptin as well. And interestingly enough, blue lights from screens and artificial lights can actually interfere with your leptin reaching your hypothalamus and influencing your hormones as well. So a lot of this has to do with hormones and your hormonal signals in your body, as opposed to the amount of energy in these macros and things like that. And also, these macros work differently. Protein gives a bit of an insulin bump. Fat gives no insulin bump. Carbs give a big insulin bump, a big rise in their insulin that stays up for like 24 hours. And so it's very difficult to lose fat and body fat when you are eating carbohydrates because it keeps your insulin elevated all the time. Um, so a calorie is not a calorie is not a calorie. And in fact, you shouldn't think about it as calories. We think about this as like, well, you don't want to eat fat because it has so many calories. And then if you have too many calories, you're going to store those calories. Calories don't weigh anything. Calories are an expression of heat energy, right? So that's like asking, how much does 37 degrees weigh? It's like, what? What the hell are you talking about? That's not the right units, right? 37 degrees doesn't weigh anything. It's not measuring weight, and neither are calories. Calories are heat energy, right? Just like temperature, right? So we look at this and we say, well, fat has 9 calories per gram. Okay, so super dense. And then protein and fat, protein and carbs, even though it's not quite this, is what is typically said is 4 calories per gram. Okay, but remember, protein is generally used as building blocks, not even used as energy source. So we say, okay, 9 calories per gram. Well, that's really new. That's really energy dense. It has all those calories, and if you don't use those calories, it's going to store those calories. Well, you don't store calories. You store molecules. And those molecules could contain potential chemical energy that can be used to drive ATP. But the weight is still the molecules. It's the grams side of that equation because we don't weigh calories. We weigh grams, right? Or kilograms, as it were. And so you should flip that equation around. This is something that a colleague of mine, Dr. Michael Eade, pointed out at a conference, and it made a lot of sense, which is you flip that around. Instead of 9 calories per 1 gram, it's 1 gram of fat gives you 9 calories of energy. But then do that with carbs and protein. It's instead of 4 calories per 1 gram, you flip it around, it's 2.2 grams per 9 calories. So getting the same amount of energy, getting the same amount of calories, even though that's a very flawed system. Just to use that system for a moment, that you will have to bring in 2.2 times as much grams into your body to get the same amount of energy, right? So if we want a 2000 calorie diet, just the same energy, but you get that predominantly from fat, which has less grams per calorie, you will bring in less weight into your body because we weigh grams. We have molecules. There's a great TED talk. I forget the guy's name, but it says when you lose weight, where does it go? Where does the weight go? Right? Where the hell does it go? And it doesn't just float out as energy. Matter cannot be destroyed or created, right? So you're actually losing atoms. Yeah, exactly. You're breathing out CO2. You're just excreting this sort of excess waste products of energy metabolism, right? And CO2 is a big part of that. And so you're losing actual molecules. Okay, so when you're eating fat, you're actually bringing in less molecules. Okay, so if you just look at like if you were to look at so let's say like 100% lean beef, right? And so 100% of your calories are coming from meat versus 50% of that is meat and fat by grams, right? So 1 gram of fat to 1 gram of protein versus 100% grams from protein. You would have to eat 3 times as much of the lean meat. So 3 pounds instead of 1 pound of mixed 1 gram of fat, 1 gram of meat, 1 pound of that, you'd have to eat 3 pounds of lean meat. What do you think is going to make you weigh more at the end of that meal? The 1 pound of fat and protein that has the same calories, or the 3 pounds of lean meat that has the same calories but 2 extra pounds of meat, right? So when you actually think about this in the units that are important here and relevant, it actually sort of makes a lot of sense. You eat a higher fat diet, especially one that's ketogenic, so your insulin is lower and down, your leptin resistance is going down, and so you're not screwing with your metabolism and fat storage. You'll be able to burn fat. You're in a fat burning metabolism. That's a ketogenic metabolism, is a fat burning metabolism, and you're also bringing in less weight. You're eating less food, and so your body will weigh less as a result of that. And so this is for these and many other reasons. This is why ketogenic diets specifically. So when you don't eat carbohydrates, you're replacing with fat and protein. Majority of this is going to be done from meat. And so high fat, meat based ketogenic diet has been shown to have better fat loss and lean muscle gain than every diet has been up against, like a high carb, low fat diet and the DASH diet and Mediterranean diets and things like that. It beats them. And not only does it beat them for weight loss, but it beats them even more significantly for fat loss, because in that high fat, meat based ketogenic diet, people were losing a significant amount of fat, but they were actually gaining lean body mass. So they're actually putting on muscle and bone, which is very important. And so the total weight that they lost could still be greater or very similar to other diet plans, but there was much more significant fat loss, and they actually gained lean muscle mass. People say, well, if you're in ketosis, you're going to raise your cortisol and you actually lose muscle. It's the opposite. Studies actually show it's the opposite. And you don't get high cortisol. You don't get deranged thyroid function. Like my thyroid hasn't budged in 8 years of being carnivore. It's still in an optimal level. And my conversion of T4 into T3 is actually above the normal optimal range. So I have better conversion. I have better thyroid function, and it's been consistent. It's never changed. It's never gone down, and so. And that's what I see in my patients as well. And I also put on muscle very easily. The old school bodybuilders, the golden era bodybuilders, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Serge Nubret, Vince Garanda, and all the rest of those people in that time, they ate basically carnivore diets, ketogenic carnivore diets, especially for the 3 months leading up to show prep. They were eating no carbs or just eating meat and eggs. And Serge Nubret would eat 6 pounds of horse meat a day. And they would get shredded. I mean, they were getting down to 3-4% body fat, or maybe even a bit less, and extremely muscular. They're putting on huge amounts of muscle, maintaining it throughout the year and staying lean throughout the year as well. And so losing weight in head-to-head randomized controlled trials, ketogenic diets have been proven to help people lose more weight. There's a further hack that you can do, which is if you increase the fat to 90% of your total calories. So people say, I don't want to eat too much fat. Well, again, you're eating more fat and less weight. Okay, so that's already good. So 90% calories from fat, less than 9% calories from protein. And again, you're not getting calories from that protein. You're using that protein to make proteins, to make cells, or to make molecules in your body. When you do that, and you get less than 9% calories from protein, it actually triggers another hormone called FGF21, which actually increases lipolysis and fat burning by an additional 400 kilocalories a day. So that's that end route with insulin, like FGF21. When that starts getting elevated, you can start burning fat even then, but it's sort of tricky to stimulate that. But studies have also shown, physiological studies, measurements have shown that being in ketosis, so keeping your insulin level down, because the higher your insulin, the higher your leptin, the lower your metabolism. And they've actually shown that physiologically in the lab, that for human subjects, that being in ketosis increases basal metabolic rate by 351 kilocalories a day. So that improves your metabolism, that lowers your insulin, it lowers your leptin resistance, and you improve your caloric output, your energy output, basal metabolic rate. And then if you're increasing your fat even more, up to 90%, and getting your protein down below 9%, you'll increase another 400 calories. So you're increasing your basal metabolic rate by 750 kilocalories a day. This is where like the sugar diet comes in, where people are eating very high, just candy and lard, but they're keeping their protein very low and below 9%. And that's triggering FGF21. And so that can help them burn fat, even though they're massively raising their insulin and causing harm, or at least transiently anyway. And causing a lot of glycation and damage from the blood sugar as well. So that's probably the best way, just eat high fat meats and do it in a ketogenic fashion. That's the best. That's a really good way to lose weight. And a lot of people, when they're doing a carnivore diet, ketogenic carnivore diet, it's actually increasing their fat, actually gets them through a fat loss stall. And that's probably because of that FGF21. But also it's really important to not just focus on the weight, because it's all about health. And some people have leptin resistance, insulin resistance, other sort of hormonal and metabolic issues that will make it slow for them to lose weight at first. But then once that heals and those metabolic issues heal, they can lose a lot of weight after that, and they will get to where they want to go. But it's really important not to try to rush these things if your body is healing, because it's really about health at the end of the day. So focus on your health, focus on how you're feeling, focus on improving your health. Eventually your hormones and metabolism will normalize and you'll start losing weight. And that's really important because you're doing it in a healthy way. You're getting proper nutrition. You're helping your body heal, as opposed to doing some sort of crash diet. I mean, there's some things people say, oh, do a carnivore diet, but do it very lean because our ancestors ate lean meat. No, they didn't. They ate whales, seals, bears, and megafauna like giant sloths, giant mammoths, and things like that. The Native Americans would eat buffalo, and they'd mix the fat and the lean together to make pemmican, which was 2 grams of fat to 1 gram of protein. That's 80% calories from fat. So it's a very high fat diet. It's not a low fat diet. And when you do eat very low fat and you're not eating carbohydrates, your body, when you're running on protein, what happens is your body has to break down a lot of that protein for energy. And it's hard on your body. And so it produces ammonia, which then gets turned into urea in your liver, and then you expel that in your liver or in your urine. Um, if you can overwhelm your liver's ability to break down that ammonia, and so that ammonia can start getting into your system and they actually cause toxicity, ammonia poisoning. And so you can actually get serious issues, neurological issues, damage your organs, things like that. And it's called protein poisoning or rabbit starvation. Lewis and Clark, the famous explorers that traveled west and explored, the West after we were sort of moved in from the eastern seaboard in early America. There were some of those people that actually weren't eating enough fat, and they were actually dying of protein poisoning. So that they needed the fat. It's very important. And so one of the hallmark symptoms of protein poisoning is you weight rapidly. So people are saying, okay, well, you're eating too much fat, you're not going to lose your fat or whatever, and then they're eating low fat and they're getting protein poisoning. And yeah, they lose weight, but they also lose their hair, they destroy their health, they feel awful, they have terrible energy, and they have all these problems. And they say, well, that's because you're in ketosis, and that's what ketosis does. No, it doesn't. I've been in ketosis for a decade. I've never had an issue. The Inuit have been in ketosis for thousands of generations. They've never had an issue with that. Even the National Academies of Science and the Institutes of Medicine have even declared publicly that the amount of carbohydrates you need throughout the entirety of your life is zero. And the entire populations have lived very healthily without any negative health effects and no negative effects on their longevity, provided they had enough protein and fat. That's the key thing. So people are eating low fat, they're getting protein poisoning, then they're getting all these issues. And then people convince them that, look, this is from ketosis. You need to get out of ketosis. You need to eat carbohydrates. And then they eat carbohydrates, and now they're getting energy from something besides protein. They stop the protein poisoning. Their body's able to clear the ammonia, and then they feel better. Their hair starts growing back in, and all these other sorts of things. And they say, like, yeah, that ketosis, that'll get you. If they just added fat, they would have had the same result. In fact, they would have had a better result because they actually would have been healthy and in ketosis. So the main thing is about health, focusing on your health, doing things right the first time to give yourself, and avoiding fat actually makes you malnourished because there are essential fatty acids and essential fat soluble vitamins that you get very sick without and you can die without. And so fat is not just an energy source. It's actually, there's a lot of nutrients there, a lot of essential nutrients that you need to get. So focus on your health first. The weight loss will happen, and it will happen better in that state when you're addressing those hormones in those ways and eating in that fashion. And you will trigger fat loss and your body will lose weight. Most people lose a lot of weight early on, but if it doesn't happen for you, just be patient. It will happen eventually. And when in doubt, increase the fat.